He laughed, signed a $100,000 check, and placed it beneath his wineglass. Certain the black waitress standing beside him couldn't understand a single word of Chinese. Sterling Beaumont thought her uniform meant she was uneducated, invisible, and easy to humiliate. So he turned her intelligence into a public bet while an entire room watched in uncomfortable silence. Then Amara opened her mouth and spoke with the precision of someone who understood far more than his insult. But her answer didn't just expose his arrogance. It uncovered a billion-dollar lie hidden inside the contract. Tell us where you're watching from, and stay until the end. This downfall will not disappoint you. Amara Bennett had barely set the porcelain teapot beside Sterling Beaumont when he snapped his fingers at her as though calling a disobedient animal. "Hey girl," he said without glancing at the name engraved on her badge. "Don't stand there pretending you understand what the adults are discussing." A ripple of obedient laughter passed through Empire Hall. Julian Beaumont, Sterling's 34-year-old son, laughed louder than anyone, while Evelyn Shaw quietly studied the guests, noting who laughed, who looked uncomfortable, and who might become a public relations problem later. Beneath crystal chandeliers and between walls of polished dark wood, more than 40 investors, attorneys, politicians, and financial advisors had gathered inside Manhattan's Golden Lotus for a private dinner preceding a close $2.4 billion agreement between Beaumont Global Holdings and Zhao Meridian. Amara simply lowered her eyes and replied, "Of course, sir." She replaced Sterling's glass when he complained about an invisible stain. Then she replaced it again because he claimed the rim felt rough. When he demanded a third glass, Samuel Park, the restaurant's owner, stepped closer, but Sterling turned to him with a thin smile. "For what this place charges, I expected trained staff at the most important table." The insult was clear. He was not criticizing the glass. He was reminding everyone that Amara's uniform made her socially disposable. Amara continued serving as Zhao Mingyu spoke calmly in Mandarin. He stated that Zhao Meridian would proceed only after an independent company verified the legal rights connected to Harbor Point, the waterfront property at the center of the agreement. Tobias Crane, Beaumont's interpreter, waited half a second before translating. Chairman Zhao is fully satisfied with the current legal condition of the property. Amara's hand paused above a wineglass. That was not an imperfect translation. It was the opposite of what Zhao had said. Across the table, Zhao's daughter and legal director Zhao Lian looked directly at Tobias but remained silent, almost as if she were testing how far he would go. Sterling responded that the land records had been mostly resolved. Tobias translated his answer into Mandarin as an absolute legal guarantee that every ownership dispute had been cleared. Amara felt her pulse sharpen. One mistranslation might have been incompetence. Two carefully altered statements, both benefiting Beaumont Global, suggested intent. She moved toward Samuel, hoping to warn him quietly, but Evelyn stepped into her path. "You're paid to keep the glasses full," she whispered, "not to listen to conversations that have nothing to do with you." Amara calmly replied that she needed to confirm a guest's food allergy. Evelyn leaned closer. "Make one mistake tonight, and you'll be unemployed before dessert." Sterling had watched the entire exchange. His eyes narrowed, not because Amara had done anything wrong, but because he had noticed the smallest change in her expression when Tobias spoke Mandarin. He began testing her. Turning toward Julian, he said loudly, "People like her hear sounds and mistake that for understanding." Julian smirked and raised his wineglass. "Maybe she thinks standing near important people makes her important." Amara gave them nothing. She continued around the table, her posture straight and her expression controlled. Yet Zhao Lian noticed her fingers tighten around the silver tray each time Tobias distorted another sentence. Naomi Alvarez, an investigative journalist attending under the identity of an investment advisor, noticed it too. She watched Amara, then Tobias, and quietly activated the recorder inside her handbag. Zhao Mingyu suddenly turned toward Amara and asked in Mandarin, "Was this fish prepared in the Suzhou style or the Hangzhou style?" Amara drew a breath, but Sterling burst into laughter before she could answer. "Chairman Zhao, you're wasting your time." She probably couldn't tell Chinese from Japanese. The room went still. Samuel stepped forward, his face tightening, but Sterling reminded him that Beaumont Global spent more than $1 million annually hosting events at Golden Lotus. The threat was polished, but unmistakable: defend your employee and lose your largest client. Then Sterling reached inside his jacket, removed a checkbook, and placed it dramatically on the table. "Let's make this entertaining," he said, clicking his pen. "I'll bet $100,000 that she cannot answer you in one complete sentence." Amara looked at the blank check, then slowly lifted her eyes toward Tobias. The interpreter's face had gone pale, and a bead of sweat rolled toward his collar. Sterling believed he had turned a black waitress into the evening's entertainment. What he did not understand was that the most frightened person in Empire Hall was not Amara. It was the man sitting beside him, terrified that she might say far more than one sentence. Sterling Beaumont signed the check with a slow, theatrical flourish, making certain every person in Empire Hall could see the 6 figures written across it. Then he slid the check beneath the base of his wineglass, as though Amara Bennett's dignity were nothing more than a coaster. 3 minutes, he announced. She speaks to Chairman Zhao in Chinese without a telephone notes or assistance. If she succeeds, she gets $100,000. If she fails, Samuel fires her immediately, and Golden Lotus issues a public apology for allowing an employee to deceive its guests. Samuel Park stepped forward at once. My employees are not entertainment, Mr. Beaumont. I will not participate in this. Sterling's smile hardened. He reminded Samuel that Beaumont Global spent more than $1 million each year hosting events at Golden Lotus. Then, lowering his voice just enough to sound more dangerous than angry, he mentioned the restaurant's upcoming license inspection and how unfortunate it would be if certain officials began examining the building more closely. The meaning was unmistakable. This was no longer a careless joke. Sterling was using money, influence, and fear to force an entire business into helping him humiliate a black woman in public. Amara looked at the check but made no move toward it. I'm not interested in your money, she said, and I will not turn someone else's language and culture into a circus act. Sterling immediately seized upon her refusal. There it is, he said, leaning back. The excuse arrives before the failure. Julian lifted his phone and began streaming privately to a group of wealthy friends, angling the camera so Amara's face filled the screen. Evelyn ordered a restaurant employee to activate the security cameras, claiming she wanted proof that Sterling was merely having harmless fun. Naomi Alvarez knew better. Evelyn wanted footage she could later cut, crop, and package into whatever story protected Beaumont Global. Naomi quietly activated her own recorder. Grace Wu stood near the service doors, gripping a tray so tightly that the glasses trembled. Sterling then attempted a sentence in Mandarin, believing he was complimenting the meal. His pronunciation was mangled, but the sentence came closer to meaning, a servant should not imagine herself equal to a guest. Tobias understood the insult perfectly and deliberately remained silent. Amara met Sterling's eyes. Are you certain you want to turn my language ability into a wager? She asked. No, Sterling replied. I'm wagering on the obvious. Zhao Lian warned him that confidence was not evidence, but Sterling dismissed her concern as oversensitivity. Amara then turned toward Zhao Mingyu and answered his original question in precise, natural Mandarin. She explained that the fish used a steaming technique associated with Jiangnan cuisine, while the sauce reflected Hangzhou traditions. She described the osmanthus garnish as a symbol of hospitality, and noted that the kitchen had reduced the sweetness for an international dining audience. The silence around the table became absolute. Zhao Mingyu tested her with a classical idiom. Amara answered with a matching proverb that preserved both its meaning and tone. Zhao Lian switched suddenly to Cantonese, and Amara followed without hesitation. An elderly guest from Shanghai then addressed her in the local dialect. Amara understood only part of his question. Instead of pretending, she answered what she could, and politely admitted that she was not fully fluent in Shanghainese. The man studied her for a moment, then rose from his chair and applauded. Zhao Mingyu stood next. Zhao Lian followed, then the rest of the delegation. Samuel and the Golden Lotus staff rose as well. One by one, several American guests stood with embarrassed expressions, realizing they had laughed at the wrong person. Zhao Mingyu explained that they were not standing simply because Amara could speak Chinese. They were standing because she had responded with respect after being treated with contempt. Only Sterling, Julian, Evelyn, and Tobias remained seated. Sterling's face tightened. He accused Samuel of staging the entire scene to embarrass him, then demanded a more difficult test. With a sharp gesture, he ordered Tobias to read a complex commercial clause from the pending agreement. Tobias read it in Mandarin, but Amara did not answer. She asked to see the corresponding English text. Evelyn immediately blocked her. Confidential documents are not for waitresses. Amara looked past Evelyn and directly at Zhao Lian. Then she spoke in Mandarin, her voice calm enough to make the warning even more chilling. I cannot answer that question, because the sentence, Mr. Crane just read does not exist in the English contract sitting in front of Mr. Beaumont. Sterling's smile disappeared. The $100,000 wager had ended in less than 3 minutes, but Amara's final sentence made everyone in Empire Hall realize they might be witnessing something far more serious than public humiliation, a multi-billion-dollar fraud unfolding at the dinner table. Within minutes, the center table of Empire Hall had been transformed from an elegant dining arrangement into an emergency legal review station. Plates were pushed aside, wineglasses removed, and 2 versions of the Beaumont-Zhao agreement were placed beneath the chandelier light. Zhao Lian ordered the doors closed and postponed the signing until every English and Chinese clause had been compared. Sterling Beaumont objected immediately. "We are not delaying a multi-billion-dollar transaction because an unknown waitress wants attention." Amara did not touch the documents. She remained several feet from the table and calmly identified the 3 phrases she had heard Tobias Crane alter. Mandatory independent audit had become internal review. No transfer of development rights had become transfer permitted after signing. And ownership remains unverified had been translated as property free of dispute. Zhao Lian moved through both contracts line by line. Her expression hardened as she confirmed every difference. The changes were real, and each one placed Zhao Meridian at greater risk while giving Beaumont Global greater control over Harbor Point. Sterling dismissed the discrepancies as technical mistakes. Tobias quickly accepted responsibility, claiming exhaustion and pressure had affected his concentration. Amara studied him before speaking. 3 errors appeared in 3 separate clauses, all involving land rights, and every error benefited the same company. That is not how random mistakes behave. Sterling's face reddened. He accused her of manufacturing a scandal to force him to honor the $100,000 bet. Amara lifted the check from beneath his wineglass and pushed it across the table. "I never asked for your money. You were the one who placed a price on your arrogance." A few guests lowered their eyes, but Zhao Lian continued watching Amara. She asked how a restaurant employee could recognize specialized legal language that even experienced executives might miss. Amara hesitated. Then she revealed that she held a doctorate in applied linguistics and had specialized in meaning distortion within bilingual commercial agreements. She had once worked as a linguistic auditor for international trade organizations, reviewing contracts in which a single altered verb could transfer millions of dollars in rights. The room reacted with stunned silence. Sterling leaned back and asked with open contempt, "Then why are you carrying plates?" Amara's eyes did not leave his. "Because education does not protect someone from being blacklisted." 3 years earlier, she explained she had reviewed a land development agreement in Oakland and discovered that the translated version granted extraction rights never approved in the original document. She refused to certify it and filed an internal warning. Within a week, an edited recording appeared online, making it sound as though she had insulted a client. Her professional record was flagged, companies canceled contracts, and legal fees consumed most of her family's savings while her mother's health deteriorated. A settlement later prevented Amara from publicly naming the corporation connected to the case. Naomi Alvarez suddenly asked whether the Oakland project had been called Baycrest Renewal. Sterling interrupted before Amara could answer. "This is irrelevant. Stop asking questions." His reaction came too quickly. Zhao Lian turned toward him. Zhao Mingyu ordered Tobias to surrender his laptop and phone so the editing history could be examined. Tobias insisted both devices belonged to Beaumont Global. Behind him, Evelyn Shaw quietly sent Julian a message, "Delete the backup folder now." Near the glass partition, Grace caught the reflection of the message on Evelyn's screen, though she could not read every word. Julian glanced down and the color drained from his face. Zhao Lian opened the contract metadata. The Chinese document had been modified at 2:13 that morning, hours after Zhao Meridian's legal team approved the final version. The edits were made under Tobias's account, but the access point originated inside Sterling's executive office. Sterling claimed someone had used his network without permission. Julian shifted in his chair, gripping his phone as though it contained something dangerous. Amara stared at the Beaumont Global emblem printed across the contract. The silver tower enclosed by a broken circle was identical to the symbol on the files that had destroyed her career 3 years earlier. Her voice became quiet. "I found these same translation patterns in Oakland. The company that paid to bury me was not some anonymous contractor." She looked directly at Sterling. "It was yours." Amara had finally connected the fraud unfolding inside Empire Hall to the destruction of her past. But before she could prove it, the people across the table were already preparing to transform her from the witness who exposed the scheme into the suspect who had supposedly created it. Sterling Beaumont understood that arguing about the contract was becoming dangerous. The English and Chinese versions were sitting side by side beneath the chandelier, and every comparison made his position weaker. So he stopped attacking the evidence and began attacking Amara. Evelyn Shaw connected her laptop to the large presentation screen at the front of Empire Hall. Within seconds, headlines from 3 years earlier appeared behind Amara in enormous letters: Interpreter loses control during international conference. Language specialist accused of distorting client's statement. Amara Bennett, suspended for professional misconduct. None of the articles mentioned that Amara had never been convicted, formally disciplined, or given a fair chance to challenge the edited recording used against her. That detail was buried beneath dramatic language and anonymous accusations. Guests who had stood to applaud her only minutes earlier now exchanged suspicious looks. Evelyn folded her arms and announced that Amara had recognized Beaumont Global from the beginning and was using the dinner to settle an old grievance. Sterling pointed toward her, as though presenting the final piece of a case. She didn't save this deal, he declared. She came here to destroy it. Amara answered that she had not known Sterling would attend the dinner. Samuel confirmed that the final VIP list had remained confidential until only a few hours before the event. Evelyn immediately suggested Amara could have accessed it through the restaurant's management system. Before Samuel could explain that ordinary employees had no such access, one of Beaumont's private security officers rushed into the hall and whispered into Sterling's ear. Sterling's expression changed from anger to satisfaction. The officer announced that confidential materials had been discovered inside Amara's locker. Everyone moved toward the employee corridor, where the open locker had already been surrounded by security. Inside lay a copy of the bilingual contract, the private guest list, a USB drive labeled Harbor Point, an envelope containing $20,000 in cash, and a Zhao Meridian business card. Sterling did not wait for anyone to examine the items. She was paid by our competitors, he said. This entire performance was corporate sabotage. Zhao Lian objected that the business card could easily have been taken from the reception table, but the money and USB created enough doubt to make the accusation dangerous. Beaumont's security team informed Amara that she would be detained until police arrived. Amara did not resist. Seal the locker, she said. Photograph everything where it was found. Record the fingerprints. Preserve the USB. And check the hallway cameras. Evelyn replied too quickly. The cameras were offline for 8 minutes because of a network failure. Naomi turned toward her. How do you know it was exactly 8 minutes? Technical staff haven't reported anything yet. Evelyn claimed an employee had informed her, but Samuel said no member of his staff had contacted her. Amara felt the past closing around her. 3 years earlier, there had also been planted documents, unexplained cash, missing surveillance footage, and a media campaign ready before anyone investigated. The method was not merely similar, it was almost identical. Grace approached Amara near the service entrance and whispered that she had seen Evelyn walking toward the locker area 20 minutes earlier. Before Grace could repeat the statement publicly, Julian pulled her aside. His voice remained soft, but his threat was unmistakable. He mentioned Grace's mother, her pending work authorization, and how easily immigration paperwork could encounter unfortunate complications after a false accusation against a powerful executive. Grace returned pale and trembling. When Zhao Lian asked what she had witnessed, Grace lowered her eyes and said she had been mistaken. Amara saw the fear in her face and understood exactly what had happened, but fear left no fingerprints. Sterling demanded that the police arrest Amara for stealing trade secrets. Zhao Mingyu refused to allow anyone to remove her until every device and recording had been preserved. He warned that any further pressure on a witness would end the Zhao Meridian deal immediately. Sterling sneered that Zhao was allowing a waitress to manipulate an international transaction. Zhao Mingyu's expression remained calm. You continue calling her a waitress as though her profession proves she cannot tell the truth. Then Samuel stepped between the security officers and the locker. Golden Lotus, he revealed, maintained an independent backup surveillance system installed after an internal theft several years earlier. It was not connected to the restaurant's main network and might contain the missing 8 minutes. Evelyn looked sharply at Julian. For the first time that evening, Amara saw genuine fear on both their faces. The locker had transformed Amara from witness to suspect, but the hidden server could reveal who had planted the money, provided they reached it before the people responsible found a way to burn the evidence with it. Samuel led Amara, Zhao Lian, and Naomi through the service kitchen and down a narrow staircase behind the wine cellar. Before they reached the old server room, the fire alarm began screaming through Golden Lotus. Employees rushed between the kitchen and dining hall as emergency lights flashed against the walls. When Samuel reached the basement corridor, he stopped. The server room door had been forced open. Smoke poured from an electrical cabinet, and a small overload device had been plugged directly into the outlet beside the backup system. Seconds later, the automatic sprinklers activated, sending water across the floor and over the server racks. The hard drives that might contain the missing 8 minutes were now trapped between fire, smoke, and water damage. Amara stared at the damaged lock. The timing was too precise. Someone had attacked the system immediately after Samuel revealed that it existed. Upstairs, Evelyn ordered the entire building evacuated and instructed Beaumont's private security team to secure the basement. Zhao Lian objected immediately. She refused to allow Sterling's employees anywhere near evidence that could implicate his company. In the confusion, Grace spotted Tobias slipping toward the delivery exit. She alerted Amara, and Naomi ran after him. Julian stepped into the corridor and blocked her, insisting the route was unsafe because of the fire. Tobias squeezed past them but dropped a prepaid phone near the kitchen door. Naomi reached it first. Julian attempted to take it from her, calling it company property, but Zhao Lian ordered him to step back. At the same time, a Golden Lotus technician began extracting whatever data remained on the least damaged drive. The first recovered footage was incomplete and blurred by water damage, but the sequence was unmistakable. A person wearing a management uniform opened the employee corridor. Evelyn entered, carrying an envelope and a USB drive. Julian remained outside, watching the hallway. Tobias appeared moments later and handed Evelyn a master key. 7 minutes passed before all three emerged. The camera angle did not clearly show Evelyn placing the money and documents inside Amara's locker, but it destroyed the claim that Amara had hidden the materials herself. Sterling immediately changed tactics. He announced that Julian had panicked and acted without authorization to protect the deal. Julian stared at his father in disbelief. In one sentence, Sterling had begun sacrificing his own son. Julian admitted that he had helped Evelyn obtain the key and disable the main cameras, but insisted that Sterling had ordered every step. Sterling told his attorneys to silence him and suggested Julian was suffering from emotional instability. Then Naomi accessed Tobias's prepaid phone. Most messages were encrypted, but one remained visible. It came from a contact, saved as S.B., and read, "She destroyed one contract before. Do not let her destroy this one. If necessary, use the Oakland method again." Amara felt the room tighten around her. The Oakland method confirmed that the attack on her career 3 years earlier had not been an isolated scandal. It had been a procedure. Tobias broke. He confessed that he had altered the Chinese contract, but said Sterling had controlled him through more than money. Beaumont Global possessed records of his gambling debts and had threatened to use them in a custody dispute that could cost him his children. Tobias agreed to open his email archive, but before he could enter the account, the prepaid phone erased itself. Messages vanished line by line until the screen returned to factory settings. Evelyn denied involvement. Naomi pointed out that only someone with corporate administrative access could trigger a remote wipe. Zhao Lian ordered every Beaumont device sealed in the room. Sterling responded by calling a city official and demanding that police remove Amara immediately. He accused her of starting the fire to destroy evidence of her own theft. While the argument intensified, the technician recovered one final basement frame. It showed the person who had installed the overload device. It was not Tobias, Evelyn, or Julian. It was one of Sterling's private security officers. In his ear was a radio receiver, and the damaged recording had captured the voice coming through it. "Destroy the server before they recover those 8 minutes." The voice belonged to Sterling Beaumont. He could no longer dismiss the scandal as a joke, a translation error, or the reckless behavior of subordinates. His order to destroy evidence had been recorded. But Sterling still possessed something more dangerous than denial, enough power to make witnesses disappear before morning. It was after midnight when local police finally entered Golden Lotus, but their questions revealed where their priorities lay. They wanted Amara to explain the $20,000 found in her locker. They asked how she had obtained the Harbor Point files and whether she had contacted Zhao Meridian before the dinner. Not one officer immediately questioned Sterling about the recorded order to destroy the backup server. Sterling calmly insisted the audio had been misunderstood. According to him, destroy the server could simply have meant shutting it down to prevent an electrical fire. Zhao Lian rejected the explanation and demanded that the Federal Commercial Fraud Unit be contacted. While officials argued over jurisdiction, Tobias disappeared from the room where security had been instructed to keep him. Surveillance footage showed 2 Beaumont guards escorting him through the rear exit. Grace was missing as well. Seconds later, Amara received a message from Grace's phone. "I lied. Don't look for me." Amara read it twice. Grace never used such blunt language, especially when frightened. Someone else had written it. Then Malik called from the Bennett apartment. Someone had broken in. Nothing valuable had been stolen, no cash, laptop, or jewelry, but an old box containing their mother's records had been torn apart. Lorraine Bennett had worked as an accountant for a community fund in Oakland before dying 2 years earlier after a long illness. While searching through the damage, Malik discovered a small recorder hidden inside the lining of one of Lorraine's suitcases. The device contained a conversation between Lorraine and an attorney. Her voice was weak but clear. She had discovered that millions of dollars in relocation funds had been diverted from the Harbor Community Trust into shell companies controlled through Beaumont Global. Amara had always believed her career was destroyed because she refused to certify a manipulated translation. The recording revealed something much larger. The altered contract she had challenged involved development rights taken from low-income communities. At the same time, her mother had uncovered the missing compensation money intended for the displaced families. Without realizing it, Amara and Lorraine possessed 2 halves of the same crime. Sterling had not merely silenced a difficult interpreter. He had launched a campaign to destroy the credibility of an entire family before Lorraine could expose the financial records. Lorraine had not been physically attacked, but during the legal battle, the family lost insurance coverage, savings, and access to specialists. Her illness worsened while Beaumont's media network portrayed her daughter as dishonest. Zhao Lian soon traced the vehicle that had taken Tobias from the restaurant to an underground parking garage near the Zhao delegation's hotel. Amara, Naomi, and Zhao's private security team hurried there. They found Tobias locked inside a black SUV with his passport and telephone missing. He admitted that Grace had also been forced into a vehicle, but she had escaped when it stopped at an intersection. Tobias provided the password to a personal cloud account he had maintained as protection. Inside were copies of emails, contracts, payment ledgers, and private instructions stretching back 8 years across 4 cities. The records documented a repeated system. Bilingual agreements were altered, interpreters were bribed, critics were discredited through media companies, relocation funds were reduced, evidence was planted in witnesses' homes or offices, and surveillance cameras conveniently failed whenever proof needed to disappear. Evelyn's name appeared beside numerous payments. Julian had signed authorization forms. Sterling approved budgets labeled crisis management. Naomi attempted to upload everything to her newsroom, but her connection was attacked almost immediately. Malik proposed using a secure federal evidence portal instead. From the damaged apartment, he began sending Lorraine's recording and the recovered documents. The upload reached 62% before the power went out. Amara heard heavy blows against Malik's door through the telephone. "Malik, get away from the entrance," she shouted. A final message reached her seconds before the call died. They didn't come for the files. They came for the original statement Mom signed. For 3 years, Amara had fought to prove she was not a liar. Now she had to save her brother and protect the document that could prove Beaumont Global had built its fortune by stealing money, land, and voices from communities powerful men assumed would never be heard. Amara reached the Bennett apartment with federal agents just minutes after the secondary alarm drove the intruders from the building. They found Malik unharmed inside a locked storage room in the basement, clutching his phone and a small fireproof envelope. The original statement Lorraine Bennett had signed was still safe. Malik had hidden it inside Amara's old Mandarin dictionary, cutting a narrow space into the pages because he knew anyone searching the apartment would look for a legal folder, not a book covered in her handwritten university notes. The notarized declaration listed a series of suspicious payments between Beaumont Global and 3 public relations companies. One of those firms had published the articles accusing Amara of professional misconduct 3 years earlier. The document did more than show that Lorraine had suspected financial theft. It connected the stolen relocation money directly to the machinery used to destroy her daughter's credibility. At the Federal Commercial Fraud Unit, Inspector Elena Morales explained why the evidence mattered. Her team had monitored Beaumont Global for more than a year, but every case had collapsed into isolated fragments. One investigation involved altered bilingual contracts. Another involved missing relocation funds. A third concerned coordinated media attacks against whistleblowers. The destruction of the Golden Lotus server had appeared to be a separate obstruction case. Until now, no witness or document had connected all four patterns. Amara's testimony, Tobias's confession, Grace's observations, and Lorraine's notarized statement created the first complete chain strong enough to support warrants, asset freezes, and conspiracy charges. Grace was found at a train station several hours later and brought in with a witness protection attorney. She admitted that Julian had threatened her mother's immigration status, but the command had come from Evelyn. Grace had accidentally recorded the exchange because her phone's voice note application was still running inside her apron pocket. Evelyn's voice could be heard clearly. "We do not need to prove Amara is guilty. We only need people arguing long enough for the deal to be signed." Grace's hands trembled as the recording ended, but she refused to withdraw her statement again. Julian then requested a private meeting with Amara. He offered to surrender internal records if she helped him avoid prosecution. Amara gave him nothing. "You do not get to use the truth as currency after spending years helping your father bury it," she said. "Tell the investigators everything. What happens to you afterward is not mine to bargain away." Cornered. Julian revealed that Sterling was preparing to leave the United States on a private aircraft and had already moved $180 million into foreign accounts. Elena immediately requested emergency orders freezing Beaumont assets and preventing Sterling from leaving the country. Before the orders were approved, Evelyn arrived voluntarily with an encrypted hard drive containing years of internal media operations. She claimed Sterling approved broad budgets but did not manage the details. According to her, Julian had designed the plan to frame Amara at Golden Lotus. Julian accused Evelyn of changing sides only because she knew Sterling intended to sacrifice them both. Within an hour, father, son, and executive had begun producing evidence against one another. Emails contradicted expense reports. Recorded calls contradicted sworn declarations. Every attempt at self-preservation exposed another layer of the conspiracy. Sterling responded with a live online press conference. He called himself the victim of an international plot to seize control of his company and described Amara as a failed professional seeking revenge. Then he released portions of Lorraine's private medical records, suggesting Amara was exploiting her mother's death to manufacture public sympathy. The move triggered immediate outrage, but it also wounded Amara in a way Sterling understood perfectly. Her mother's final year's hospital visits, lost coverage, declining health were now being dissected on screens by strangers. That night, Naomi received an anonymous video file. It showed Sterling 3 years earlier inside a Beaumont conference room speaking about Amara after the Oakland dispute. "She understands too many languages," he said. "Make sure that by next week nobody wants to hear her speak." The sender had signed the message with only 2 initials, JB. Julian had delivered evidence capable of destroying his father, but the recording also proved that he had known the truth for 3 years. The betrayal inside the Beaumont family was no longer a private fracture. It was becoming a war, and every new confession threatened to drag the entire investigation beyond anyone's control. By sunrise, the federal investigation room looked less like an office and more like the command center of a war. Elena Morales' team compared the files from Evelyn's hard drive with Tobias's private archive and Lorraine Bennett's records. What emerged was not a collection of isolated scandals, but a coordinated pattern stretching across 8 years and 4 cities. At least 13 people had been targeted after challenging Beaumont Global land deals: 4 interpreters, 2 local attorneys, 3 community activists, 1 accountant, 2 auditors, and 1 investigative journalist. Some had been fired. Others had been buried beneath lawsuits they could not afford to fight. Several had been smeared by anonymous articles that repeated the same language once used against Amara: unstable, dishonest, unprofessional, motivated by revenge. Every victim had discovered a different piece of the machinery, and Beaumont Global had ensured none of them remained credible long enough to connect the pieces. The Beaumont board called an emergency meeting and offered Amara a private settlement before the investigation could expand. The proposal included a public apology, $5 million in compensation, full restoration of her professional reputation, and payment of Malik's remaining education expenses. In exchange, Amara would seal the records involving the older cases and publicly describe Sterling's actions as the misconduct of one corrupt executive rather than evidence of a company-wide system. The money could have transformed the Bennett family's life. It could have replaced what they lost during Lorraine's illness and ended years of debt, but accepting it would leave 13 other victims buried under the same lies that had nearly destroyed her. Amara pushed the agreement back across the table. "You are not offering justice," she said. "You are offering me a more comfortable form of silence." Zhao Meridian officially canceled the $2.4 billion transaction and committed funding for independent audits of 4 previous Beaumont projects. Zhao Lian then produced an email showing that Sterling had inserted a hidden success fee into the Harbor Point budget. The payment was scheduled to reach Tobias only after the deal was signed. Cornered, Tobias admitted Beaumont Global maintained a confidential list of language professionals categorized by how easily they could be controlled. Some were marked with notes about debt, family pressure, immigration, vulnerability, or career ambition. Amara's name appeared on the same list. Beside it were 6 words that froze the room: cannot be bought, must be neutralized. At the special board meeting, Sterling appeared by video and demanded Julian's immediate dismissal, claiming his son had engineered the entire operation without authorization. Julian responded by playing Sterling's recorded instructions to alter the Chinese contract. Evelyn then displayed budgets showing millions spent on media attacks, surveillance, and reputation containment. Sterling retaliated by releasing emails, proving Julian and Evelyn had personally profited from several fraudulent projects. Julian had accepted bonuses tied to forced land acquisitions. Evelyn had received percentages from companies hired to discredit witnesses. Neither could present themselves as innocent employees following orders. They had helped build the system and benefited from it. The board suspended Sterling, Julian, and Evelyn, then voted to surrender the company's internal files to federal prosecutors. For several minutes it seemed the structure protecting Sterling had finally collapsed. Then Elena received an emergency alert. Confidential federal documents had been accessed and forwarded to Sterling's legal team. A critical search warrant had been delayed, giving his staff time to close accounts, erase records, and move additional assets overseas. Someone inside the investigation was helping him. Amara stared at the evidence spread across the table. They had contracts, recordings, payment ledgers, witnesses, and proof of obstruction. Yet Sterling's influence still reached into the institutions responsible for holding him accountable. Malik compared the leaked timestamps with the federal access logs. Only one official had opened every compromised document minutes before it reached Sterling's attorneys. That same official was scheduled to preside over the public hearing the following morning. The man entrusted with judging Sterling Beaumont might also be the man helping him escape justice. The fight was no longer against one millionaire or even one corporation. Amara would have to enter a nationally televised hearing, controlled by someone who might already have been purchased, and this time the entire country would be watching. Sterling Beaumont entered the City Hall chamber, surrounded by attorneys, media consultants, and private security, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, as though appearance alone could erase the evidence against him. Before the hearing began, he repeatedly described the $100,000 wager as an awkward joke that had been misunderstood. His legal team tried to reduce the entire case to a personal conflict between a wealthy businessman and an angry former interpreter. They asked why a woman with a doctorate had been working as a waitress, why Amara had kept her mother's records for years, why she had not spoken publicly sooner, and whether the viral video had given her a chance to become famous. Every question carried the same accusation that hardship made her suspicious, silence made her dishonest, and public attention made her greedy. Amara refused to let them drag the hearing back to the insult at Golden Lotus. She calmly described the complete sequence. The Chinese contract had been altered. Cash and documents had been planted in her locker. Surveillance footage had been erased. The backup server had been sabotaged. Witnesses had been abducted or threatened. Her reputation had been destroyed through a diss. 3-year media campaign community relocation funds had been transferred into shell companies, and confidential federal records had been leaked to Sterling's attorneys. "I am not standing here because Mr. Beaumont assumed I could not speak Chinese," she said. "I am standing here because he believed people without money would never be allowed to speak in any language." When Malik attempted to present evidence showing that confidential investigation files had been leaked, The presiding official interrupted him and ruled the access logs irrelevant. Elena Morales requested that the official remove himself from the hearing, but he refused. Naomi then stood before the press section and released the login records directly to the assembled journalists. The official's account had accessed every compromised file minutes before the documents reached Sterling's legal team. The chamber erupted. Reporters shouted questions, members of the public demanded an explanation, and 2 council members called for an immediate suspension. Under mounting pressure, the presiding official was forced to leave, and an independent member took control of the hearing. With the protection inside the room suddenly gone, the witnesses began standing one by one. Grace testified that Julian had threatened her mother's immigration status and that Evelyn had ordered the intimidation. Tobias admitted that he had altered the contract and accepted responsibility for the damage his actions caused. Evelyn surrendered a list of media campaigns created to discredit whistleblowers. Julian confirmed that Sterling had ordered Amara's locker to be staged, but also admitted that he had helped obtain the key and erase the cameras. 3 other interpreters described being bribed, threatened, or blacklisted after refusing to manipulate agreements. Representatives from 4 displaced communities then rose and told the council how families had lost homes, while compensation funds disappeared into companies connected to Beaumont Global. Sterling's lead attorney demanded to know whether Amara could prove her account was more than subjective interpretation. Amara requested that the hearing play the video of Sterling placing the $100,000 bet, followed by the recordings of him ordering the contract changes and the destruction of the Golden Lotus server. She translated each statement into English, Mandarin, and Cantonese, preserving every word and every command so no one could claim that the truth had been lost in translation. When she finished, Zhao Mingyu stood. Then the former interpreters rose. The displaced families followed along with Golden Lotus employees and most of the chamber. The council referred the case for prosecution on charges involving commercial fraud, document falsification, witness bribery, and intimidation, obstruction of justice, destruction of evidence, conspiracy to steal community funds, and retaliation against whistleblowers. Beaumont Global's principal assets were frozen pending a full investigation. As officers escorted Sterling from the chamber, he turned toward Amara. "You think you won because they stood up?" "No," she replied. "I won because they no longer have to bow." But after the room began to empty, Elena pulled Amara aside. The case was not finished. $180 million had vanished from Beaumont accounts, money that could still be used to purchase silence, destroy evidence, or reward anyone willing to protect Sterling. He had lost his public power, but the final measure of justice would not be the sight of a millionaire in handcuffs. It would be whether the stolen money returned to the people who had lost their homes, their careers, and their voices. 6 months later, Golden Lotus hosted a very different gathering. The same hall where Sterling Beaumont had once treated Amara Bennett like entertainment now held the launch of the Clear Voice Fund and a recovery program for communities damaged by Beaumont Global. Sterling had been indicted on federal charges including conspiracy to commit fraud, document falsification, witness intimidation, destruction of evidence, and theft of community funds. But investigators refused to let everyone else hide behind him. Julian cooperated with prosecutors yet still pleaded guilty to disabling surveillance cameras, helping plant evidence, and threatening Grace. Evelyn surrendered years of internal records, but continued to face charges for directing smear campaigns and concealing criminal activity. Tobias temporarily lost his professional certification, accepted community service, and agreed to help establish stronger ethical standards for interpreters. The official who leaked federal records was suspended and charged with obstruction. Beaumont Global was placed under independent supervision and forced to sell assets to repay the communities it had exploited. Investigators eventually traced most of the missing $180 million through offshore accounts. The recovered money was used to compensate families forced from their land, restore relocation funds, cover legal costs for whistleblowers, and remove fabricated disciplinary records created by Beaumont's media network. Interpreters who had been blacklisted received new certification reviews. Amara's professional reputation was formally restored, though she understood that no official document could return the years her family had lost, or the time her mother had spent fighting to be believed. Zhao Lian offered Amara a position as Zhao Meridian's independent director of linguistic integrity, Amara accepted only after receiving authority to build a system that could not be controlled by executives whose bonuses depended on a deal being approved. The Clear Voice initiative required 2 independent interpreters for high-value agreements, automated comparisons between language versions, permanent editing histories, anonymous reporting channels, legal protection for anyone refusing to translate dishonestly, and regular external audits. It also prohibited companies from using immigration status, debt illness, or family hardship to control witnesses. Sterling's $100,000 check was still legally enforceable, but Amara refused to keep the money. Under the civil settlement, it funded scholarships for students of color and low-income students studying languages, commercial law, and interpretation ethics. Samuel framed a copy of the check near the entrance to Empire Hall. Beneath it, he placed a simple inscription: "Money can purchase a wager. It cannot purchase the truth." When the ceremony began, Amara walked onto the stage wearing a modest dark suit. Beneath the jacket was the blouse Lorraine had given her when she earned her doctorate. She spoke first in English, then in Mandarin and Cantonese. She said she did not want to be remembered as the black waitress who shocked a room by speaking Chinese. That description still treated her intelligence as a surprise. She wanted to be remembered as someone who refused to let skin color determine intelligence, employment determine human value, money determine credibility, or power decide which version of the truth was allowed to survive. Amara thanked Grace for returning to testify, Tobias for finally accepting responsibility, Malik for protecting Lorraine's statement, Naomi for releasing the evidence, and the displaced families who stood up even after years of intimidation. She did not pretend every wrong had been repaired. Homes had been lost. Careers had been damaged. Her mother was gone. Justice could return money and restore records, but it could not reverse time. When Amara finished, Zhao Mingyu rose first. Samuel and the Golden Lotus staff followed. The blacklisted interpreters stood next. Then the families who had lost their land rose from their seats. Finally, the entire room stood. This time no one was standing because they were surprised that Amara could speak Chinese. They stood because she had transformed one moment of public humiliation into a reckoning powerful enough to change an entire system. Sterling had wagered $100,000 that Amara could not understand another language, but his greatest mistake was not underestimating her vocabulary. It was believing that a woman in a waitress's uniform could never make a room full of powerful people listen. Never mistake silence for ignorance, hardship for failure, or humility for weakness. The person carrying your plate today may still be the only one in the room, intelligent and courageous enough to recognize the lie everyone else has chosen to ignore. Sterling Beaumont believed money could measure intelligence, purchase silence, and decide whose truth deserved to be heard. Instead, the waitress he mocked exposed a corrupt system, restored the voices of 13 victims, and turned his arrogant $100,000 wager into a scholarship for those he would have underestimated. Amara's victory was never simply about speaking Chinese. It was about refusing to let race, wealth, or a uniform define her worth. So, tell us in the comments, would you have stayed silent in that room or stood beside Amara before the truth was proven? If this story reminded you never to judge someone by their appearance or profession, please like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories where courage forces injustice to answer.